I mean, given that, I mean, particularly we've had very eloquent analysis of this incredibly timely meeting, this genius meeting, this when immigration took centre stage, so congratulations to all of you for putting it together. It's a brilliant time, and given that you could not have got a better analysis of this, I thought I'd, rather than bore you with just repeating everything, I thought I'd just quickly maybe come to something. I mean, Aaron said maybe give you a quick snapshot of what it would mean to tail off from what Dan said about where the Labour Party was. I mean, I was director of JCWI, so I can tell you we don't have an open immigration policy. I did a very good analysis of all the MPs who were doing immigration cases for many years, and you know, we do not have an open immigration policy. So I can tell you that there are examples all over Europe of where social democratic and Labour parties have been in this position. And we don't have to be the guinea pigs of having to concentrate on immigration necessarily and just go through the torture. We can actually just simply look at our sister parties and understand very clearly what actually happens. UKIP, for example, know exactly what they're doing. So, for example, they go to Eastleigh, where at first when you hear Eastleigh, and I'm not an expert on Eastleigh, I represent London, there are not many migrants in Eastleigh. Immigration quickly and rapidly becomes a #1 issue in Eastleigh, and UKIP, and particularly the Conservatives, morph into an immigration party. They fight it on immigration. Immigration is, of course, not an issue in that constituency, never has been, and now, of course, it's not an issue. This is exactly the kind of pattern that happened in the Netherlands, and the Labour Party were massively infected by this. The Labour Party, the Social Democratic Party in the Netherlands, are very much like us. They go out on the doorstep, they fight elections, they are very much like the model of what we are. They are pursuing policies then and now like we are. They're having debates in rooms like this. They have a leader, Deirdre Sampson, who is age-wise very much like Ed Miliband, you saw recently. And they went on a process of following a party led by Geert Wilders, who was invited by Lord Pearson, the erstwhile leader of UKIP, who was rubbish, sorry, crisis here, before Nigel Farage took over again. So we know that they're very similar to UKIP. Was invited here, sort of traipsed around the lawn here before they sort of bundled him off because he was too creepy about Islam, you know, not the British way. And the Social Democratic Party, Labour Party of the Netherlands started following the immigration debate of Geert Wilders. And they moved and repeated all the messages. So they said things like migrants are more likely to cause crime, and they knew that was not the case. And they got into a debate about saying that illegal immigrants were going to be criminalised, for example. And a certain wing of the Dutch Labour Party didn't want to do that, but were forced into that debate. And this kind of extraordinary torture happened to the Labour Party in the Netherlands, a country which was extraordinarily liberal and open. And of course, open meant economically prosperous in many ways, dynamic and progressive. The Labour Party, led by Deirdre Sampson, a young guy who we've met, was a party which only got out of this torture by literally going out in the country and winning an election eventually, because I'm going to get to the point because I really don't want to bore you after all these speeches and all the time that's been taken. But by actually going right out to the country and doing what is now happening in the Labour Party, which is getting on the doorstep and meeting everyone. But before that phase, they went through this process of copying their UKIP-style party on immigration. They got to the point where I met Dutch politicians who said, we're not just going to be pragmatic, we're not just going to triangulate, and you've heard that word, on immigration. We're adopting a policy of, we'll talk about immigration more than the right, we're going to decide to adopt a policy day by day. So I said, what's this day by day policy? Well, we'll decide each morning what we're going to do. This is what one of the colleagues said to me. I said, well, what does that mean? Well, we'll be ahead of the game on immigration. We'll show no fear. This is the way it's going to be, you know. I thought, that's interesting. And how is that going to get you votes? Absolutely. And of course they were more or less wiped out. And of course that happened to their MEPs. And eventually they got through that phase, and during Samson came in, and they eventually, a long story, but they eventually built up again and eventually won an election. And when they won that election, the Dutch people got tired of Geert Wilders. And I can quote you what they got tired of, because the Dutch press said the Dutch people tired of the aggression of this right-wing, populist, anti-immigration party of Geert Wilders. And the calamitous point was what Dan mentioned, which is that Jonathan has told us the facts. In Britain today, the facts are very clear, and you know, Jonathan goes on his day programme, I literally record it, and I favourite all these tweets, not because I'm a fan, but because I just want all the little facts, you know, like, you know, 0.06% of calls claim benefits when they come, you know, or 6%, I can give you them all if you want to, you know, it's just amazing, the reality of what we have. But of course the facts are not important to people. As Dan said, this is a visceral issue, and it always has been. It's a psychology of immigration. So what was happening in the Netherlands was we eventually got to the point where the Labour Party followed Geert Wilders, and Geert Wilders invented us a Dutch family, a fictitious family, who were always being done down, a working class family, you remember this story, who were always being punished by the system, a Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And eventually this fictitious family became real. And eventually they were, I think they were involved in a violent assault. And it all became real. And in an election, it all became an actual factual situation. And a whole sequence of events happened where the Dutch people just got tired of it. And the Labour Party in the Netherlands started talking about the economy and jobs and young people and got back onto the issues. And today in the Queen's speech, as Dan quite rightly said, what we saw was a very interesting sort of Linton Crosby 2 years before the election. And if he hasn't done it, I do apologise to him. But you saw putting immigration in the centre of a Queen's speech. And what was that? What's the essence of it? It was an internal checks, which is landlords checking immigrants, which I think is like 1960s style. First of all, it can't work. It's internal controls of a 1960s, 70s variety. It can't really work. It was given to the Telegraph's front page. Then you have access to healthcare, which was an exaggerated savings, because if you look at the parliamentary questions in 2009, 2010, Anne Milton, and this is Dan's area, revealed that it was something like 10, 20 million savings of people accessing the healthcare system. But it's 109 billion budget, the healthcare budget. So yes, there's a savings, and I'm never going for 1 minute not say that there was a saving to be made of people wrongly accessing our National Health Service, and that must be dealt with. But it's the proportionality issue, because there's going to be bureaucracy involved in dealing with this. And this is the centrepiece of the Queen's speech, not the economy. So there you have proportionality. So the Tories are deciding, and I could quote Cameron in February, where he said, too often migrants take advantage of us. And you heard what Jonathan said earlier. So clearly they are going down this path. And for the Labour Party, as Dan said earlier, it's important for us to show leadership and also good sense, that we have many examples in Europe, and Denmark is another example, but not as good as the Dutch example, of where people will understand that if you try and follow the UKIP example, in the end, people will understand that it doesn't get you anywhere. In the short term, it may get you somewhere, but in the long run, people will understand what Jonathan said, which is that it is a global economy. Immigration will be a reality. But the more you talk about it, the more, as YouGov tells us, people think it's important. So the people who were surveyed recently by YouGov, who understood that the Tory message that there was a third reduction in immigration, also were 2/3 more worried about it, and they acknowledged that there was a reduction. That's what YouGov are telling us, because we're all talking about it more. And then it's been fueled in tabloids and so on. So this is a visceral psychological issue, and it was ever thus, as Dan explained the history. So I think in conclusion what I would say is that as a social democratic movement, as a Labour Party, yes, we have to have an immigration policy. Yes, we have to be aware of abuse in the system and fraud and all of these building blocks. But we also have to understand we're in a global economy, understand what the examples are, and be really intelligent about how we take this debate forward. We understand what they did in the Queen's speech today. I think Ed Miliband was right to talk about the economy. He attacked it back by talking about the economy. But we will have to, as a movement, address this in a much bigger way, putting a lot more resources behind it if we have to look at what happened to our sister parties when this debate happened. You just have to look at what happened to the Labour Party in Denmark, in the way that immigration devastated their party. So these lessons are very, very important for us, because immigration does not operate as a single issue with facts and figures. It can be a very devastating issue in a global economy. And if we can learn that lesson, we can try and learn not to let it devastate our party, because in the end the right want that to happen. And we have to learn the lessons and not let that happen. But it will take, I think Dan used the word leadership, a lot of courage and leadership and intelligence for that not to happen. But they're having another try. And final word, when Michael Howard said, you're thinking what I'm thinking, it didn't work. So they're trying again, and they're having another go, but this time it's a little bit more intelligent the way they're doing it. So we have to respond, but it's going to have to be sophisticated, intelligent approach how we do it. But I would urge people to look at examples across Europe of how our sister parties dealt with it and didn't deal with it. And that would be my contribution today, to look at those analyses.
Thank you.